On behalf of the department, we thank you greatly for being here this evening. Thank you for coming to the 2021 Neighbors Building Neighborhoods Conference Mixer. We greatly appreciate your presence here today, and we hope that you've met someone that you didn't know, that you actually engaged with someone you didn't know, and that you walk away with a resource and the information about somebody or something that you didn't have before you left here. Okay? So I'm on a strict schedule because our team has given me instructions of what it is I am to do. So I want to fulfill that mission, Mr. Devil. Anyway, I'm going to make a few announcements first. I want to remind you to drop off your garage parking tickets. If you parked in the garage, please drop off your tickets and registration so that they might be validated. Also, this is very important, okay? There is a bathroom located inside the pagoda on the first floor, as well as a porta potty outside. Outside which way? Over there. Outside this way. Okay. And you have to stick around because we have some awesome prizes and we're going to be doing raffles throughout the event. So don't eat and run because you're going to lose out if you did. Also know that the Expo and our Uplift Awards, which we did last year for the first time, the Expo is going to be on September 11th at Lakewood Park. And the Uplift Award nominations are open until August 27th. Now, as far as the Expo is concerned, the Expo is all about neighborhoods and residents. So please intend to be there. Be there or be there. So in order to find out more about this information, please visit www.norfolk.com/expo. And then today is not the end of the Indian Conference, right? No. Is that right? Right. So what's going on Monday and Tuesday? Virtual workshop. Absolutely. Thank you, Miss Shirley. She gets an extra prize, somebody. So yes, there are free virtual sessions on Monday and Tuesday on Zoom. Everybody in here should certainly know how to use Zoom by now. Is that right? I would think so, yes. And so you can still register at www. I don't expect you all to remember all of this. There will be information, there's already been information sent, and it will be sent again if you want to register for those sessions. And now, without further ado, I want to really introduce someone who has been awesome in the city of Norfolk. And this has been a long time coming. If I could sing like Sam Cooke, I would do that. But since I can't, I just want to read a little bit. If you don't mind. So, Aaliyah Slappy Wilson. She is the city of Norfolk's first diversity, equity, and inclusion officer. And I believe that many of you know who Aaliyah is, but if you don't, you will. Just wait a minute. She leads an interdepartmental team to advance equity in the city of Norfolk through institutional strategies and external programming. You may also recognize Aaliyah as a keynote speaker for our 2021 Neighborhood Leadership Breakfast. If you would, please give a round of applause and welcome to Aaliyah Slappy.
Thank you so much, Michelle. Can we get a hand to the neighborhood engagement team for the city of Norfolk? They do a phenomenal job with each of you in mind, and so I think that is just, it's amazing. Even for everyone to be here today on a Sunday afternoon, gathering this way, I think it's top notch. But I just want to make sure I'm in the right space, not in the right room, but in the right space. And so I just want to do a poll of everybody here. So I'm going to ask a few things, and if it applies to you, I'd like you to scream as loud as you possibly can, right? I want you to make a lot of noise. People need to know this information. So in the last 7 days, if you have supported, taking your wallet out and paid money at a local minority, woman, or small business in the city of Norfolk, I want you to make as much noise as possible right now. So I have just two more. If in the last 7 days, so between now and last Sunday, right, if you have learned something new about one of your neighbors, or at least somebody in this room, or outside in this space who's almost like a neighbor, I want to hear from you. And if you just do this in general, it doesn't have to be the last 7 days, but in your life, if you've made it a habit to think of creative solutions for how you fix any challenge that you have seen in your community, I definitely want to hear from you right now. So I definitely think that I am in the right space. And what that also means is that if you have made noise for anything that I've said so far, you may be a neighborhood influencer. And so, yes, and let's give them for neighborhood influencers. Because our neighborhood influencers are the game changers. They're the ones that are making sure that as new people come into the neighborhood, whether they're homeowners or they're renters or they're just temporarily residing in your community, that you make them feel a part. There's something real serious about somebody feeling like they belong. Anybody ever felt like they didn't belong somewhere?
Yes.
The face you made, like, There are times when we've been in spaces where we felt like we didn't belong. And it's not because of what someone said, but it's the absence of somebody making you feel comfortable. And so my charge for you today, 2 things. One, when we finish today's formal program, I want to make sure that, that you go and you visit the neighborhood influencer table that's just around the corner over here so you can learn more about what we mean when we say neighborhood influencer. And I hope that in the next 7 days, you identify something on that list of things under neighborhood influencer that you're not currently doing. And I challenge you to do at least one of those things. And if you want to add a lot of razzle dazzle, do at least 3 things. Because that's how you start to make people feel included and welcome and like they really belong. And that's where change happens. That's how our neighborhoods come together. That's how we collectively find creative solutions to problems. And that's where transformation happens. And so there's work that's done at the city level, but there's also work that each of you guys have to do, right? It's our collective efforts. It's like this parallel track where our neighbors and the city are working together to make Norfolk the most incredible city. And so I work in diversity, equity, and inclusion. So we're constantly thinking about how we do just this, which is being a place where Norfolk welcomes everyone. And so if you feel like your neighborhood hasn't achieved that just yet, definitely figure out what you can be doing to make sure that Norfolk is welcoming everyone. So thank you all. I hope you have a fantastic conference. And please become a neighborhood influencer.
Thank you so very much, Aaliyah. She never disappoints. I just appreciate her passion for what she does and what she envisions our city and our people can be. So we thank you so very much. Now I have the pleasure of introducing another dynamic speaker. This one traveled a bit to be with us today, and we greatly appreciate it. And that is Marla Newman. And Marla is the Community Development Director for the city of Winston-Salem, North Carolina. And if you would indulge me, am I supposed to hold the microphone up here? I was told not to move. So can everyone hear me? Yes. Okay, thank you so very much. Great. I'm trying to follow directions. Okay, as I said, Ms. Newman is the Community Development Director for the city of Winston-Salem, North Carolina. And she is responsible for the city's code enforcement, for rehab and first-time homebuyer lending, and community planning. And I will say, as the Director of the Department of Neighborhood Services, that's a lot. She has a lot under her purview. And I did not even share everything that she actually does there. She is a results-oriented community development leader with over 20 years of extensive stakeholder engagement, neighborhood planning, and housing policy experience in supporting the creation of healthy, vibrant, and equitable communities. That sounds very familiar to us here in Norfolk, I hope. Marla is passionate about and committed to building equitable, collaborative processes which bring together policymakers, community stakeholders, people such as yourselves, and most importantly, the residents of neighborhoods impacted, and that's all of you here, so we thank you for that. As if that wasn't enough, Marla is also the owner of Blueprints Consulting, an urban planning and community development firm. And this is how many of us here in Norfolk met Marla. She is a faculty member of NeighborWorks America. And we thank her for that work, yes. She is the former executive director of the Louisiana Housing Alliance, director of economic development for 2 Kansas City, Missouri-based nonprofits, and program officer with the Greater Kansas City Local Initiative Support Coalition. That's Liz. Okay, not done. Marta is busy. I don't know if Marta is more than one person because she holds a doctorate of jurisprudence from the University of Texas School of Law and a master's in urban and regional planning from the University of New Orleans. She's an attorney as well. She is licensed to practice law in Missouri, Texas, and Alabama. And without further delay, I give you Marlon Newman. Wonder Woman.
Thank you. Good evening. How are you all?
Good.
All right. Well, first and foremost, let me say greetings from Winston-Salem. Just as a point of reference, a little bit about Winston. We're the home or former home of some things that you might, or people you might be familiar with. We are home of Krispy Kreme donuts. How about Hanes brand? Hanes Unwear?
Yes.
Would be us. How about R.J. Reynolds Tobacco? Yeah, but it was home there. That's what kind of fueled the economy in Winston-Salem for quite a number of years. How about BB&T? Now Truist Bank. That was the headquarters. And for some of our basketball fans, how about CP3, Chris Paul of the Phoenix Suns? That's home for Chris Paul. But more importantly, one of the most prolific and important storytellers of our time, Maya Angelou. She was a faculty at Wake Forest University, and so Winston-Salem was her last home. So I'll say on behalf of Winston, which is what we affectionately call Winston-Salem, I am honored and humbled to be here, and I thank you all for being here today and for the Neighborhood Services Division for inviting me. And we're going to go on and get started talking about neighborhood and story and where we go from here. So, as a true NeighborWorks faculty member, we wouldn't have our time together without a quick quiz. I also used to teach a little bit too. So I'll just start with this simple question, and anybody who has an answer, yell it out. What is a neighborhood? I feel like I'm in every All right, I'm going to give you a hint. So some of you might recognize some of these images. Now, the Flintstones might throw you off a little bit, but I mean, when you think about it, they were a community, they were a neighborhood, right? And so then we just have different iterations of people together. But the key, and I heard somebody say, is people. So, let's dig a little deeper. Geographic areas that contain social networks. So, what do I mean by that? Some of these might look a little familiar, but a geographically local community, and you'll hear me use the word community quite a bit, and sometimes I do it interchangeably, but they're all, of course, within a larger city, town, or area, and from a social perspective, that's where you really find a lot of face-to-face interaction, right? How you build relationships among neighbors, people you do business with. And so really we just kind of defined it as social networks. Places where residents seek to realize common values, socialize youth, and maintain effective control. All right? All right, you got that? All right, so now we're going to get down to business. So, Part of our theme here is tell a new story, right? So where do we go? How do we tell a new story? So as we celebrate this chance to be together, because I think for a lot of us, being together in person again is a time for celebration, right? What do we make of this moment? You know, this is a pivotal moment in time for us, right? So, of course, these two questions come to mind that you see on the screen. What should you consider in reimagining your neighborhood for the future? What will it look like? What should it look like? And then how can you use and tell stories to move your vision forward? Okay? So those are the two big questions. What should you consider? And how do you tell your story? So one thing I'll tell you, now I'm one who says I don't know a lot and I understand even little, but one thing I do know, change is opportunity, right? So the first thing I know is that our world, and by extension your neighborhood or your community, is changed forever. And I don't mean just, some businesses have closed or have left, but I'm even thinking about us as humans. We've been significantly impacted. Physically, financially, emotionally, and even mentally. We have to be honest about all of the ways in which COVID has impacted us. And I'm not saying that the impact from a community's perspective are necessarily bad or good. They're just different. We're just in a different time now. So we're going to need, first of all, as we come to grips with the fact that we've changed, we're going to need to show each other some grace in the process. Okay? So a lot of grace as we move forward. But again, like I said, change is opportunity. So second, this opportunity to be right here, right now, I consider it maybe a call or a challenge or even a mandate to dream, to be bold, to be courageous, be tenacious, and certainly to make it happen. We got work to do. Okay? So think about it, especially in the context of your neighborhood, or like I said earlier, I kind of prefer to use the word community. If you knew on March 1st of last year what you know today, what would you have done differently over these last 2 months? Who would you have engaged with? Why would you have engaged with them? And more importantly, how would you engage with them? How has your concept or understanding of community even changed? And then, what are you now called to do? Or more importantly, who are you now called to be in this new world that we're in? So, I make a point of talking about building and being in community. Okay? That's in community that I want to emphasize. So, what do we mean by community? And maybe it's time that we kind of take a step back and ask ourselves, revisit, maybe re-examine, possibly even redefine what it means to be in community. And how do we go about building that community? Because again now, we've changed. Our community has changed. We've been impacted. So what does that look like going forward? So when we think about stories, because we're supposed to be telling a new story for our journey forward. Of course, there are different kinds of stories. Some of the most common involve love and relationships, triumph and victories, transfers of knowledge. Where we talk about history and tradition and culture. But also, story is a powerful community building tool. It creates a sense of community where people bond and build relationships. There was a study by a couple of folks called Dillon and Chapin, and they identified 4 elements that are central to creating that sense of community, where we feel like we're in relationship with each other. One is membership. And I heard a question earlier about feeling like you belong. That feeling of belonging or sharing a sense of personal relatedness, that's one key concept of feeling like you're that sense of community. Influence, like, and it's interesting too, with Leah talking about the influence. But in this case, feeling like you matter, like you make a difference to a group, or that the group matters to you and the group matters to its members. Another is reinforcement. How do you integrate and fulfill the needs of the members of the community? And then that shared emotional connection. What do we have in common that we can share and identify with to build that relationship going further? One of the things, however, we have to think or keep in mind is, as members of the community, people have to feel safe to be who they are. Okay? Take off their masks, acknowledge their woundedness and brokenness, which is common to all of us, right? And I think in many ways we can all identify with some woundedness and brokenness, just in life in general, but certainly over these last 16, 17 months that we've been dealing with the pandemic. And we also have to offer a deep respect and true listening to those in the community. We have to listen to each other. Not listen long enough to say what's on your mind or what you think, but truly listen intentionally to hear and understand what those in your community are saying to you. Now, story can be sacred, okay? And you have to be able to use it. Story must be used for good, obviously to uplift, heal, bond. And I really wanted to take a moment to stress that, because unfortunately, we've been witness to stories that have not been used for good. Just as one quick example, the situation with George Floyd. The initial press release that came out from the police department said there was a medical accident. Of course, we knew otherwise. But that was a story that was told not to uplift or heal, right, or for good. So we have to make sure that our intent, our purpose, when we tell stories, when we create new stories, that they're for the good of the community. So, where do we go from here? And I just thought it was interesting that I'm here with you for your NPN conference, and these were some of your previous conferences when we were able to be together inside and build that community in previous years. And of course, we've got the next 2 days coming up on the conference experience. So where do we take this day and this moment, and where do we go from here? So one of the first things I'll say is you have to know your history, okay? You have to know your current story origin. So I heard it mentioned earlier that you have about 120 neighborhood associations, you have about 11 business associations. Who are your neighbors? Who are your associations? Who are your businesses? Where did they come from? How did they get started? It's good to know where you started from to kind of help chart a path to where you're going. Next, you have to understand what's changed in your neighborhood and why. Was the change really primarily related to COVID? Or were there already changes underway and maybe COVID helped to accelerate those? You kind of have to know, well, what's going on? Take what they call an environmental scan and know what's happening where you are. You have to also think about what's been positive that you can use to build on. Right? So we talk about leveraging your history, leveraging your culture, leveraging your traditions. But how do we take these assets, and I'll speak of assets again in a minute, how do we take these assets and use them to help us go that path forward? What are some of the achievements we've had that we can celebrate and build on? Of course, I'll ask, okay, so what do we question, but we can't be too quick to answer, right? Because as individuals and members of community, we alone can't figure out that answer. Because we have to invite all members of the community into a collective story of tomorrow. And so when I talk about all members, so it's like learn who your neighbors are, what gifts and what talents they bring or they can offer. How do you mobilize these assets of people and their gifts and their talents to build the neighborhood and build it from the inside out, right? How do we take responsibility for our neighborhoods and build our neighborhood and create our story going forward rather than waiting to be influenced by those outside circumstances around us? How is there a role or a place for all who desire to be a part of moving forward? And when I think about this, I think about that thing about usual suspects. You know, we can't default back to those usual suspects. You know, neighborhoods are increasingly diverse, and some of the diversity is not readily apparent on its face. And so think about that a minute. Some of it's not readily apparent at first blush. We have renters, we have owners. We have differently abled members of our community. We have Black, Indigenous, people of color. We have people who are from our LGBTQ community. And some of that stuff may not be readily obvious, but you have to take the time, again, be intentional about getting to know your neighbors and those folks who help make up your community. And one thing I know I've been guilty of, so I'll own that first and confess, we have to make a concerted effort to involve our young people. Okay? They bring energy, ideas, certainly working hands, and a desire a lot to be a part of the community. So we have to figure out a way to bring them in. And certainly this is an excellent training ground for them to be tomorrow's leaders. There's no better place than to start at home than to start in that community. So figure the better we train them at home than to have them trained elsewhere, right? Learning starts at home. So what can members expect from community to support moving forward? The crafting and telling a story must be inclusive. You've heard me use the word intentional a lot. You've got to be in purpose, and you've got to do it in love. You know, there are different communities and neighborhoods around the country who have changed over time, not necessarily as we relate to COVID today. A couple of them I'll name, we can do some research about them later, but they give different examples of the kind of change. Some you might want to emulate, some you might want to take notes about and say, let's resolve something different. So one is Bronzeville neighborhood in Chicago. It changed a lot. One of the most noticeable changes was the physical aspect and who was able to come into that community, but unfortunately who was not invited into the community as the community changed in terms of the housing stock, the value of the housing, those who were able to afford it. So we have to be mindful of lessons like that. Again, from my own hometown, I'm originally from Kansas City, Missouri. We have the Ivanhoe neighborhood, where you have a real grassroots effort to come together for the good of a larger area. And the Ivanhoe area is a pretty large area that actually encompasses a number of smaller neighborhoods, but they were able to mobilize, create an actual community resource center, engage staff, and really make some push to even bring about some policy changes with the city of Kansas City. And then I can even think about in Winston-Salem right now. We, like you, are a choice neighborhoods community. So we are looking at how we rebuild community around our current public housing development, just like you all are doing with St. Paul. How do we make sure that everybody is at the table, all of the voices are heard, everyone feels like they are being included, and we are including them on purpose and in love?